Hi everybody. So this is the first video I'm going to do to teach you a little bit about connected speech. So we've mentioned this a little bit before, but I want to go into it in more detail and give you a little bit of practice in hearing and maybe a little bit saying for yourself connected speech. And we'll talk more about why this is important and why we're learning about this as well. So what is connected speech? Um, when I'm going through this video, I'm probably going to ask you sometimes to pause so that you can repeat some things. And sometimes I will just leave spaces in the video for you to repeat. But connected speech is putting sounds together in a way that native speakers do to be more fluent. And it's more of a natural kind of process for us. So this is kind of the reason why when you hear Americans sometimes, or native English speakers of all kinds, speak in a classroom situation or a teacher, or maybe even on the news, you can understand them pretty well because they're speaking slowly and they're trying to make themselves better understood. But when you're listening to them have a conversation between each other, maybe your classmates, or in a class discussion, then all of a sudden it sounds like they're speaking faster and it's hard to pick out the words. So I'm going to give you an example. And right there, I said I'm going to give you, instead of what I would normally say in connected speech is I'm going to give you. And I would change those words and sounds in that way. So I'll give you a sense of this by looking at this little exchange, this dialogue between two people, a patient and a doctor. So I want you to take a look at this, and you'll see it doesn't look like normal English, right? There's some strange words in there. It's hard to understand. So I want you to try reading this out loud to yourself and see if you can figure out what is trying to be said here. So I'll give you a minute to do that. You might want to pause your video and then just start saying it out loud and see if you can figure out what is being said here. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to practice a little bit here and maybe you figured it out. If I would say this out loud, let's see if this helps. And then I'll show you what it looks like in standard English. So the patient is saying, doctor, 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 I've got toothache, an earache, sore eyes, bruised arms, a stomach ache, and I fart all the time. The doctor says, I see, perhaps you'd like to wait in the corridor. Okay, and this is from a British English, so they would have a slightly different accent when saying this. But I think you can get the idea that this is being spelled phonetically, or how it sounds, rather than how it looks. So if we go down here, this shows you what it's really saying. Doctor, doctor, I've got toothache, an earache, sore eyes, bruised arms, a stomach ache, and I fart all the time. Pass gas, right? And the doctor says, I see, perhaps you'd like to wait in the corridor or the hallway. All right, so I think if we look at those two things together, we can see how that becomes this, right? So we don't say toothache, we say toothache. We don't say an earache, we say an earache. So some of those sounds go on to the next one and they blend together. And that's really what connected speech is, okay? So we're going to look at this in another example to give you an idea. So let's just look at this word here, or this phrase rather, that says, you must tell him, okay? So we understand that. It's pretty easy. And what I want you to do is count the sounds in this sentence. So if we're saying this in standard speech, not connected speech, for example, you is just one sound because it's just the sound you, right? Then how many in must? Must. So about 4. And t, right? Must. Okay, so the next one is tell, l. So about 3 there as well. And him, him. So 3 there as well, I think. Yeah. So we'll move this up to kind of get the sense of it here. So the sounds here in this sentence is 11 sounds, okay? Now, what about if I say it in connected speech? So if you listen this way, you must tell him. So that's what you would normally hear. You must tell him. So you can tell how some sounds have dropped already, right? So instead of just you must tell him, we're only saying the T once. So you must tell him. And the H sound gets dropped entirely, so it becomes im instead of him. So all of a sudden, it's now you, one sound, must, 4 sounds again, L, which is one sound, L, im, 2 sounds, im. So it becomes, and this all kind of goes and flows together. So it becomes, instead of you must tell him, it becomes you must tell him. You must tell him. Okay, you see the difference? So this is how it sounds with connected speech. And I'll give you an example again because it doesn't always mean, so the sounds there went from 11 to 8, but it isn't always a case of dropping the number of sounds, but changing the way they're combined. And again, this is not something that we think about too much as native speakers. It's just something that is natural and that happens, right? So we have another example here, nice to meet you, which is what we might hear when we meet somebody first. So we shake hands, say nice to meet you, nice to meet you. But when we say nice to meet you, it's about 9 sounds. Na, I, s, which is 3. To, o, meet, 3. Meet you, which is 1. So that's about 9 sounds. Now, if I say a more connected speech, it becomes nice to meet you. Okay, and again, this all sort of goes together. So you'd say it's very fast at like 1. So the O becomes that schwa sound, which is very common in connected speech, that instead of the longer vowel. So that shorter sound, meet kind of becomes me, and then the T and the U. So you can say how if you say that fast, meet you, meet ya, meet ya. The U becomes a again the schwa sound, and that upside down E. Remember that we had before. And then it becomes instead that sound goes on to the next word, and it becomes nice to meet ya instead of nice to meet you, right? And you can understand how then it's harder to pick out those words. But the sounds, they've changed and moved to where they are, but the sounds stay the same amount. So nice stays the same. Ta it's ta instead of 2, but it's still only 2. It's still 2 sounds. And meet you, it becomes meetcha. So me, 2 sounds. Cha, ch, is 2 sounds as well. But they've just changed that one of those sounds has moved to the last kind of word phrase there. So it's still 9 sounds, but it's a matter of where they appear. So that's kind of connected speech. I'm going to give you some more examples here with kind of common questions and show you a little bit more how this works. So hopefully this will help you be able to pick them out a little bit better when you are hearing native speakers. And again, the idea is not necessarily for you to be able to do this because it's not something that comes easily. You can try a little bit to become more fluent in connecting your words together, that sort of flow, and which goes along with the intonation and the rise and fall. But you don't have to speak this like a native speaker. More importantly is being able to hear this and understand what's being said. So in everyday conversation, in a classroom where there's a discussion going on, or where maybe your teacher is speaking quickly in a lecture as well. And it is quicker sometimes, but it's also about the changes in sounds. Okay, so here's some other examples. Did you eat yet becomes did you eat yet? So let's try that. Repeat that after me. Did you eat yet? Okay, good. And again, you see how this happens. Did you, did ya? It just changes to that sound. And again, the schwa in there, right? That upside down E, the sound. So what is his name becomes what's his name. Again, we're dropping, often with H's, we drop that sound and we just put contractions, what is to what's together. Even if we saw this as what is, many native speakers would read it what's, right? What's his name? So that's another example. And that's another one of the simple ways that you can try to get a little bit more connected speech into your own speaking is by using more contractions. Because native speakers rarely, even in a more formal presentation, unless they're trying to be very serious or emphasize something, say I am, they say I'm, right? Or they don't say what is, they say what's. So we generally do use contractions quite a lot. So that's something to try to get used to more. All right, so here's one that kind of shows how it gets from one to the other. So we have an hour and a half becomes an hour and a half. And it's difficult for me even to say that in a way that is not connected because we are so used to this kind of construction. Does he like her becomes does he like her? And again, let's try that after me. An hour and a half. Does he like her? Okay. So again, pushing those sounds together. I am going to get you becomes I'm going to get you. And that's a really kind of strange one. It doesn't sound like that at all. But you can see it in some way. Going to, gonna. It kind of makes sense. And get you instead of get you, getcha, right? So you can see how it happens in some ways. And then she's a nice person becomes she's a nice person. So she's it kind of becomes one word, she's a. Right? So this explains the process of what happens here. An turns into an hour, an hour and an hour and a half, using the schwa sound. The we drop the H off hour, an hour, and turns into the weak form un, and the A turns into a schwa. An hour and a half becomes an hour and a half. Right? And the weak form is the strong form is what we use when we are speaking either to emphasize or for a more standard kind of way of talking. We went over this a little bit when we talked about stress at the very beginning of the semester. But this is, the weak form is what we use in connected speech, how the sound changes when we're trying to speak more fluently. Does he like you becomes does he like her, or does he like, yeah. The S on does turns to Z sound, and we drop the H and the he. So, does he, no H anymore, does he like her? No H, does he like her? I am going to get you, I am contracts to I'm, and going and to turn into gonna. So we end up saying 4 words rather than 6. I added the getcha because that's what I think I hear more, even more than that. So it could be I'm gonna get you, but it ends up sounding more like I'm gonna get you. She's a nice person, she is turns to she's, it's contracted, and A turns into a schwa, the sound. The S and IS joins the A and almost becomes a Z sound. She's a nice person. All right, so here's a few more. Make this a new page. I will also add all of these to the module as connected speech notes, so you will be able to look these over again. So again, these are just some common questions, some common forms that you might come across. And if we were in the class, we might try this a little with asking each other and see if we could recognize them. But for now, let's just practice. So I will say it with the standard way of speaking it, and then I will do here, after each one, is the connected speech way, how the sound changes, and I will do those, and I ask you to repeat it after I do each of those to try to get the sense of what it sounds like to yourself. So what are you going to do tonight becomes, what are you going to do tonight? All right, so let's try that. What are you going to do tonight? So you can hear a big difference there. What are you So it's what are ya schwa sound gonna do tonight? What are you gonna do tonight? Okay, good. Next one. What do you usually do at the weekends? Becomes what do you usually do at the weekends? Again, that what do you? What do you? It becomes like one big word. What do ya? And the T flattens to the D sound. What did you do yesterday? Becomes what'd you do yesterday? So what did you is all changed into what'd ya. Did ya, did ya, did you, did ya. So what'd you do yesterday? Let's repeat that. What'd you do yesterday? Good. How is it going? And I'm sure you've heard this one before. How's it going? Okay, so again, the contraction and changing the S to the Z sound. So let's try that. How's it going? And again, you can see the emphasis, the intonation rising in some of these as well. And these are not yes or no questions, so it doesn't necessarily rise, but you can see how the sound changes. So what do you want to eat becomes what do you want to eat? All right, let's try that again. What do you want to eat? All right, good. I know it's a hard one. Want to becomes wanna. Want to, wanna, right? What have you got there? As in if someone was hiding something from you or they had a book and you wanted to know what it was, you could say, what have you got there? So to that, it becomes, what have you got there? And the yeah is actually more of, you is actually more of a yeah sound again. We change the schwa sound. So what have you got there? Make sure you say that after me. What have you got there? Good. How often do you come here? So how often do you come here? Again, we get the schwa sound and we say something instead like, how often do you come here? And that might sound like I'm saying it very fast, but in our head, that doesn't sound fast at all. We can easily pick out those kinds of words. So I'll try that again and repeat it after me. How often do you come here? Good. This one is have you ever, because have you becomes have you. Have you ever been fishing? And the strong form of that verb is been, and the short form is been. So have you ever been fishing? And then have you ever been fishing becomes have you ever been fishing? So let's try that. Have you ever been fishing? Good. And then do you want to go to the movies? So do you is something we would say with a lot of things. So that's a good form to know. And as you can see, want to becomes a lot. Always becomes wanna. Want to, wanna. Okay. So again, we're kind of flattening the sound and then changing some of the sounds too. So you can see that the schwa, you becomes ya, to becomes ta in both places here. So do you want to go to the movies becomes do you want to go to the movies? Okay, so let's try that again. Do you want to go to the movies? Do you want to go to the movies? Good. And you can see again that stress, movies, and the rest of it becomes less stressed. And then finally, would you ever write a poem? And poem is, if you have not written or read many poems before, it's just a short writing that sometimes rhymes and is more artistic. Or it's literary, usually fictional. So would you ever write a poem becomes would you ever write a poem? So would ya instead of would you. Similar to would ya, which is what did you, but would you becomes would ya. Would you ever write a poem? Okay, great. So I think and hope that you're getting an idea of how it sounds with connected speech. The last thing I want to do is go over some of the more common forms of this, and this is something you can practice and go back to on your own if you want to just fast forward to this part and listen and repeat back. And this is also, again, not so much necessarily for you to be able to do this yourself every time. Some of them you will be able to more easily do, like gonna for going to, or how's it going, or some of the contractions, but it's more for you to be able to recognize and hear it in others. So this is some of the most common connected speech forms. You can also find this, and you call it reduced forms, so because they become smaller. And you can also find this in this week's module as well. And these are ones that they found that all Americans, North American accents at least, and sometimes in many cases in other Englishes too, like British English or others, are the same. So even if you have a different accent because you're from the south of America, then from the middle of America or the east coast of America, they all still had these same kinds of ones. So they only put it in here if it was something that you would hear really all across North American English, which includes Canada as well. So all kind of, they put what it looks like and what you would see written, and then instead how it actually sounds. So how are you becomes how are ya. How do you do becomes howdy. And this one is used mostly just in the South. So you get the idea. So for each of these, I'll read what it's supposed to, not supposed to, but what the more standard form is, the strong form, and then the weak form or reduced form that we use in connected speech. And I'll pause after each one so you can repeat it back and kind of hear the difference, right? So how are you becomes how are ya. How do you do becomes howdy. Although again, that's not used very much. Farewells, goodbye becomes goodbye. I'm sure you've heard this one before, goodbye. Or just bye. And see you becomes see ya. So this is our kind of see you later. You hear that quite a lot, right? And we hear this kind of form also when we talk about nighttime, like good night becomes good night. Right? So we just shorten the good just to g. And again, that is very confusing if it's not something you're used to hearing. So long, which is another way of saying, informal way of saying goodbye, becomes so long. You can hear a little bit of the schwa in there too. So again, goodbye, bye, see ya, so long. Okay, those are good ones to practice. And then I want you to repeat these ones too. These are all some of the ones that I went over in those questions, and some of the more common ones that we use, where it's a verb plus to, and to always becomes the sound, the schwa sound, to. So going to becomes going to, and every time after I say that one, I'll pause after I say the connected form version, reduced form, so that you can repeat it. Going to becomes gonna. Got to becomes gotta. Have to becomes have to. Ought to becomes oughta. Want to becomes wanna. And you can see that the T sounds get even completely lost in that. So this is modals plus have. So could, might, should, things that predict the future. Could have, might have, should have, things that you wish you had done differently. So could have becomes coulda. Might have becomes mighta. Should have becomes shoulda. Okay, so coulda, mighta, shoulda. We have an expression in English that says, if someone regrets doing something, they wish they had done something differently. Like, oh, if I had only gotten up earlier, I would have gotten all of my homework done. And would have, not would have, right? And if I'd only gotten up earlier, I would have gotten all my homework done. And the answer sometimes to these kinds of things by somebody would be, coulda, shoulda, woulda. What you mean could have, should have, would have. That if you could have done this, then you should have done this, you would have done this, but you didn't do any of that. So it's kind of a way of making fun of people. Everyone thinks that they could have done something better. So coulda, shoulda, woulda. We just say something like that. And that's a good example of connected speech. Okay, then we're going to go back up to some of the other combined words that some of you've heard probably a lot, like come on. You hear come on, right? Go on, get out of, get outta. So it turns the T to the D and the O in both cases, and of to the sound. Get out of here. Get out of here. Get out of here. What becomes what. So come on, go on, get out of what. And then these are shortened words where we just drop a sound. And some of these I'm sure you've heard before too, like bout. I don't know about that. You hear that instead of I do not know about that. You hear I don't know about that. So bout, another for another, round for around, cause instead of because. I'm sure you hear that all the time. So when people say cause, that's not actually a word. What they mean is because. And anything with an ing, we often drop the G sound. So I've been running around instead of I have been running around. Just means just. I'm just saying. We just take off that T sound. Old becomes old. Drop the D. You. I don't really see a big difference here, but I guess you and your becomes your. Is that your bag? It's a your instead of your, right? Instead of is that your bag? Say is that your bag? So we'll try those. About, another, round, cause. I'll just say going here. Going. Just, ol, you, your. And these are again some more that are combined ones. I'm sure you've heard kinda before. I say it a lot, and it's very hard for me to say kind of. Again, that's a schwa sound. So kinda. That's kinda true. Kind of true. Sorta instead of sort of. Typa instead of type of. A lotta instead of a lot of. A lot of people think that instead of a lot of people think that. In front of instead of in front of. So he is standing in front of the door. Out of, like before. Out of here. So we'll try those. Kinda, sorta, typa, a lotta, in front of, outa. And then finally the question forms, many of which we already did. And some of these are not exactly spelled the same way, but the sound is the same. So again, I will just read out the shortened forms and have you repeat them after me. So for how is that becomes howza. How do you becomes how'd ya. How did you becomes how'd ya. How would you becomes how'd ya. How would ya. Now that one's a little bit harder. Do you want to becomes do you wanna. And I think it's kind of a J sound, but it's more D, do ya, do you wanna go to the movies. Do you want to becomes you wanna as well. So either of these is acceptable. And kind of the D sound gets dropped a little bit. What do you becomes what do you. What does he? What is he? What did you? What'd ya? And that also is the same for what would you? What would ya? Same thing. Sometimes. What will? What'll you do? Instead of what will you do? What is her? We saw this one before. What's her? What's her name? What is his? What's his? Where are you? Where are you? And when do you? When'd you? And then you get longer phrases. Where did you eat? Where'd you eat? You can see how much it gets put there. Where'd you eat? Did you eat yet? Did you eat yet? That's one we tried before. Did you have? Did you have? Agree with that exactly. Did you ever? Did you ever? And would you becomes would ya. We'll try those one more time. And you can repeat. Howza? How'd ya? How'd ya? How would ya? You wanna? You wanna? Would ya? What is he? Would ya? What'll? What's her? What's his? Where ya? Whenja? Where jeet? Jeet yet? Did you? Jever? Would ya? Okay, so hopefully that gives you a good sense. I'd like you to move on to the next video. We're going to do a little bit of practice with just me speaking a dialogue, and you're going to try to see if you can recognize and fill in the blanks for this. And you can use this to help and pause it and listen again.